Okay, so the bills to watch in this legislation season, I'm going to spend most of my time on one bill right now. We're going to have more of these as the season goes on, but this is the big one. And I'm going to rewind to 2017. So AB 705, Irwin, probably everybody in the room has heard about it. If you haven't, I don't know why you haven't heard about it. So this bill, and this is a bill that was passed by the Assembly and passed by the Senate and was signed into law. It is law. I'm going to repeat, it is law. And there is nothing that you are going to do in this legislative season to change this law. You have to separate this law from the bill that's in process. This law simply says that we are going to increase the chance that a student can enter and complete transfer level math and English in 1 year. 3 years of their ESL. And I think I can agree with that as a faculty member, I should do whatever I can in my power to make sure students can get through English level, transfer level English and math in 1 year. I can't argue with that. So when you go into a legislator's office and you say, I hate AB 705, that's what you're saying you hate. You don't have to argue with me, just hear me, right? It also said that we shouldn't be using things like AccuPlacer, right? And I took calculus in high school. I took AP calculus in high school, and I used AccuPlacer years later, and I was placed like 5 levels below in math. So what our AccuPlacer and those practices also were putting people at a lower level than they needed to be. So it also said, let's use something like high school coursework or GPA. Okay. The third part is the part that everybody's frustrated with, and that's why I'm trying to separate it for you. It says that the BOG gets to establish regulations. The BOG is the Board of Governors. They are appointed by the governor of California. They are real estate people and business people, and there is a board of trustee on there and a couple faculty and a couple students, but for the most part, it's a large board of people who know the governor. Okay, this is typical for any law. Any law. So a law is created. If it happens to do with the California community colleges, the law is usually broad, and then Title V regulations are written by the chancellor's office, approved by the Board of Governors. And if you go to Title V, that section 55522, that's where probably your beef is. It's not with AB 705, it's with the Title V regulations, okay? All right, so fast forward a couple years, we have a memo that just came out. Now, those Title V regulations said if the colleges aren't doing a good enough job implementing AB 705 and what they've now called equitable placement, then the chancellor's office can crack the whip. And so that memo from November 2021 is the whip crack from the chancellor's office. And that's a link at the top to that memo if you need it. So I put it in the chat, and if you need me to put it in the chat again, I'm happy to do that. So what this memo says, and I've highlighted the most important parts because I think it's like a 16-page memo, those of you who've read it. It says the colleges are directed by the chancellor's office to shift everybody to transfer level math and English, the vast majority of students. And when the districts heard this, they almost all of them just got rid of all pre-transfer coursework in their schedules for the next couple semesters. That's kind of the response. I know at College of Canyons, that's pretty much what we did. It does have some caveats that if a student has a goal other than transfer, some college level math might be appropriate. And then the third piece in there is that pre-transfer courses have not been disallowed. However, you need data if you're going to run them. Now, I was at the Consultation Council yesterday, and this is the piece that I brought up, and it was recorded, and it will be posted to the Consultation Council website. So if you search California Community Colleges Consultation Council, you'll find it when it's put up there. And it was near the end, and I did push back on this piece. And Aisha Lowe said very clearly, pre-transfer courses have not been disallowed, but you need to show with data that they're worth it. Here's the problem. Is that it's a chicken and egg issue. If we're not allowed to run them without data showing it, but we don't have the data to show it, how can we run them? How can we prove that we can use those courses if we've been disallowed to have them, right? We're never going to be able to bring them back to a point that we can have those courses. And on top of that, there's a lot of pre-transfer coursework that has nothing to do with transfer students. So if those students aren't being measured in terms of success in any way, then we're in trouble. So we can never really have, yes, are they allowed pre-transfer? Sure, but can we offer them? No. So we can't offer them because the data won't allow us to offer them. And I would argue that there's a lot of problem with the data. FACC did a public records request for the equitable placement data for all the colleges, and I do have that, and if anybody would like it, I can send it to you. Okay, so this, just to summarize where we are, back in 2017, that bill became law. That's law. You're not changing that law. Then we have Title V regulations. The interesting thing about Title V regs is they are changeable. You can modify them. They're modified all the time. And I will give the example of ethnic studies requirement from the idea that we should have that in our degree processes to actually getting it was about a 6-month time period. We also modified the distance education Title V requirements, again, in about 6 months. So Title V is malleable within the system and can be changed. AB 1705 essentially takes most of what is in Title V regs and it codifies it in law if it passes. So I'll repeat that. If AB 1705, as is written now, is passed in the legislature, it will become law. So much of what you don't like in the regs or you have concerns with in the regs will then become law. And then that takes years to change. So there is no more important time for advocacy than now, because we need to be involved in this bill. It affects every single discipline, not just math and English, not just math and English. Our students being able to write and to do quantitative reasoning affects every single discipline, and I would say affects every citizen, right? So this is an important time to have a conversation. So let's talk about 1705. 1705 is being billed as cleanup language for 705. And at this moment, FACC has not taken a position on this piece of legislation. I have been hounded by emails asking, why don't we have an opposed? Well, we are talking to the author. We have been talking to the author since December. We have gotten amendments since December. And when you have an author who is listening and having conversations and understands your concerns, you don't oppose them. So please don't say FACC has an opposed position, because it undermines our ability to negotiate fairly with the legislature. If at some point we have to take an opposed position, we can. But that will come from our Leg Committee or our Executive Committee. It'll be a conversation with our committees. All right. So what this bill does, and I do have some access to some amendments. Stephanie and I were sent by the author. So what's in print today versus what we know they're going to accept on amendments. Irwin is the author. Somebody asked, Irwin is same author, 1705, same author. There are some amendments. So this language here assumes the amendments, but this bill would prohibit colleges from requiring students to enroll in pre-transfer level English and math coursework under very, very limited circumstances, and provide clarifying amendments to current equitable placement practices consistent with the existing regulations, right? So again, putting those regulations into law. Requires students with a program goal that includes a requirement in written communications and quantitative reasoning courses to be placed, enrolled, and complete. I don't know how the heck we're supposed to make them complete. Transfer level English and math in the first year. And I believe they've changed that to the first time they enter the discipline path. So they've made a little modify, but still they want them to do it not just in a year, but in their first year as soon as possible. And then they've included in the definition of pre-transfer, everything before anything that doesn't transfer to a UC or CSU, right? A 4-year is transfer. So anything else is pre-transfer, including non-credit, which the whole point of non-credit is to be able to offer courses in those skills that are not yet college level. So the latest amendment includes non-credit as pre-transfer. So this would mean that we can't offer non-credit pre-transfer courses in math and English. We can if they're support, co-requisite support or tutoring, but we can't offer them as a separate class. Okay, so now is the time to advocate, and I do have some ideas for you. But this has been introduced in the Assembly. It was actually late January, but I'll say February. It's going to move to Policy Committee end of March, early April. You may want to consider public comment, but I would try and get to your legislators before then. It'll go to full vote in the Assembly either late May, early June. If it passes the full Assembly, then it will go on to the Senate this summer. And then the full Senate will have a Policy Committee in Senate too. Full vote in September and on to the governor's desk in October. I cannot stress enough that there is incredible, strong political support for this bill. California Acceleration Project, Campaign for College Opportunity, Public Advocates, Ed Trust West, Public Policy Institute of California, they all have created quite a bit of research, I'm doing air quotes, research, showing that AB 705 and the Chancellor's Office guiding placement is the best way to go straight into transfer level for almost every single student. They have been spoon-fed this research and data over several years. There are lots of glossy research documents that look really great. And it will probably be very difficult to stop this bill in totality. Our best option is to try and influence the language of the bill. In doing so, I recommend the next couple things. When you go, I had somebody that I talked to, I went and talked to a group of faculty at Pierce, and one of the faculty said, I'm going to come out swinging. I'm going to go beat up those legislators. I'm going to meet with all of them and beat them up. It's not going to help. They're not going to listen. They're going to meet with you. You can yell at them, but it's not going to be very effective. So the key when you walk in is to acknowledge that many of our previous placement practices created lengthy remedial pathways that were barriers to students. Say it, get it out of your mouth, say AB 705 has done some good, please, because they all believe it. So if you go in and say the world is flat when they think the world is round, you're not, the conversation's over. But if you go in and say, okay, it's done some good. We're working really hard. We're implementing it the best we can. But we have noticed a few things, right? And these are the things that we've noticed. Bring some students in. So communicate that we need to preserve pre-transfer in our mission for some students. Pre-transfer includes college level work. College level is pre-transfer. Intermediate algebra is college level, right? So also, if you go in and you're talking about AB 705 and you're trying to undo that law, which again, remember I looked at the law with you, it's not that bad. They're not going to hear you because that's a law that's been passed and you don't have, if you're over here and they're over here, it's going to be a hard conversation. You need to get closer to them and then try and pull them to your side. So this is an amendment that I hope we can all get behind. I also submitted a resolution to the ASCCC Area C meeting. And this came from a faculty member at Pierce, and then we sort of tweaked it. So we think that this would at least preserve the pre-transfer. So placement and enrollment of students in a transfer level English or mathematics course should not prevent students from enrolling in pre-transfer level English or mathematics course when a student determines a course fulfills their academic needs based on a desire to complete a certificate or CTE program, make up for learning loss from the COVID pandemic or break in education, build skills or reskill, or fulfill a lifelong priority in written communication and quantitative reasoning courses. AB 705 shall not prohibit nor deny a student the opportunity to enroll in any pre-transfer level English or math courses based on a student's right to determine for themselves their academic needs. So what this amendment does is it does not challenge AB 1705's mandate on placing students in transfer level math and English, but it leaves the option for our students to make a choice on their own based on what they want to study, right? And what has happened with that big giant narrative I showed you of, the last decade plus of legislation is we're narrowing the community college mission. And this is just one more step to narrow it even more, that students won't have access to the courses that they want. We in our mission have lifelong learning as a mission. And if students choose that they want to take intermediate algebra, they should be allowed to take it. So if the law says place them in trigonometry, fine, place them in trigonometry. But if the student chooses to opt out, let them opt out. Okay, a couple more things, and then I'll pause. Here are some other suggested amendments or ideas to talk about. There is an understanding that pre-transfer or remediation is arithmetic. It's not just arithmetic. It's not just how you spell, right? That the legislators have this assumption that we're talking about very remedial classes, not skills that they would need to know in order to perform well at college. So, and I'm sorry, Aileen, your English, I don't have enough English examples. Maybe you can help me add some English examples, but there's lots of skills in between basic arithmetic and trigonometry, right? And I think we need to define for the legislature when we say remediation or pre-transfer, really what those courses are. And then other suggested amendments. What do we need as faculty to do this work? This law was implemented with almost zero support for faculty. So we need to demand, and the author is welcoming this from us. We have heard very positively back from the author. So we have asked for more professional development, embedded faculty tutors in the classroom, smaller class sizes, money to update the classroom environment. The list goes on and on. These are just a few things. But how are you going to support faculty? If we really say, yes, we're going to take all students in transfer level, what do we need to make that happen? And then there's something called the 1805 templates. This was another law from Irwin that came in between 705 and now, that was a data template. And this is the data that the chancellor's office gets from the districts that is saying we're not doing a good job on 705. And those are the reports that I have if anybody wants them. We have asked the author to add drops before census. So if we're moving from placement to enrollment in, right? Placement in transfer level math and English is what AB 705 said. This is enrollment. We need to then collect data on enrollment, which means day one, they're in the class. Right before census, they drop because they don't want to have it on their transcript, right? We need to know what that drop is. And I did a very, very back of the napkins sketch out of data from my own college, College of the Canyons. I looked at fall 17 to fall 19, because in math, we early implemented a lot of the AB 705 ideas. And in trigonometry, there's a huge drop. It's about 3 times the amount of students dropped before census, just between those 2 semesters. So we need to look at that. We got this in the language of the bill. The printed version right now, it's in, it was taken out in the amendment. So Stephanie and I are trying to get it back in. The chancellor's office took it out because they said it was too much work to collect one more number, one more data set. It was too much work for them. And then we want to remove the word non-credit from the definition of pre-transfer. So I think I'm going to pause there because I think that's all my slides on 1705, and let's